What is up, everybody? I'm NoLucksGiven here with your afternoon snap, and today Bar Sinister is the featured location. So we're taking a look at a pretty old game here. This game was actually played in September of last year, which is the last time Bar Sinister was a featured location, and I put together this crazy deck for the featured location. Now, a few cards have changed and a few new cards have come out, so I will talk about my updated list in just a moment, but for now I just wanted to look at a really crazy game that shows just some of the awesome things that you can get up to with Bar Sinister. And while it might not immediately seem like all of these pieces come together, if you weren't around last time Bar Sinister was out or you weren't paying attention or whatever, move cards are actually really good with the location. Actually, for two reasons. I'll talk about one of those reasons in a little bit, but the primary way that move cards can really work with Bar Sinister is they allow you to be more flexible with how you play into Bar Sinister, because you can move any number of Jeffs or Nightcrawlers out of the location, which then allows you to control how many copies of something that you get, and then you can play something else into the location. So this game I don't think I actually played perfectly in hindsight. I think I probably should have just played Magic here into Lemuria. Magic would give us more options and more turns, which is always great. But I just wind up setting up with the Forge because I didn't realize I was gonna draw Carnage next turn and could have curved perfectly from Magic into Forge Carnage, and that would have been really good, but you know, whatever. We're still gonna do some pretty insane stuff in this video. I intentionally move all of my Nightcrawlers into Murder World just to get them off the board, because otherwise I would run out of space. And then yeah, here I draw the Carnage, so a little bit awkward. I don't actually get to make use of the Jeff shenanigans that I was talking about because Lemuria means that Forge never revealed itself, so this would be the same as if you just played two cards in one turn, which is something that you can also do, and that's part of the reason I had Titania and Nova in this build of the deck as well, or really just Titania, I guess, but all of those cards can also work with move cards in various degrees as well. The fact that they're all cheap just means that you might be able to play Titania and Venom both together on turn 4, and that's another way to grab huge Venoms, and that's what this deck is all about. You grab a huge Venom and then you put Arnim Zola in Bar Sinister. You can also use the Living Tribunal to spread all of that power around, but really the way that you're going to get those crazy numbers is going to be with Arnim Zola. But Hulkbuster is also really good. So Hulkbuster was recently nerfed or buffed. I don't know, jury is still out on that one, but Hulkbuster is really insane in Bar Sinister, so they nerfed it just in time here. You get to make some absolutely crazy numbers with this, and here we will see an example of my opponent making use of movement cards in Bar Sinister. They're going to be showcasing the other powerful strategy that you can use with this featured location. So we are just going to make a huge card in one location. Meanwhile, my opponent is going to focus on making all of their cards huge, and we'll see who comes out on top. You've seen the thumbnail. You know what I am about to get up to here. It's going to be pretty crazy, but my opponent is going to play a blue Marvel into Bar Sinister and just get one copy of it, and then next turn they're going to move out all 3 Jeffs, and they are going to then grab 3 copies of Onslaught here, and those copies of Onslaught will double up each other as well, and that'll make everything on their board absolutely massive. So this is another strategy that you can use with the featured location. It's potentially good with like Iron Man and things too, and potentially also with Magic and Living Tribunal, but it's not going to be the Arnim Zola strategy, which is just crazy powerful. My opponent was nice enough to stay in it here just to see what happens, and of course I wasn't snapping because I'm just trying to make big numbers today. I'm not trying to present the most competitive deck, just trying to have some fun. So this is where the fun really gets started. Arnim Zola copies itself in Bar Sinister, sending the first Arnim Zola to those other 2 locations, which then sends Venom around, and after a while, this is the position that we're left with. One other thing that I wanted to share, because I know I'm gonna get a bunch of comments like this, like, what if your opponent just plays Shang-Chi or plays Shadow King? Who cares? We're here to have fun. But if they do, you are totally boned here, as we're gonna see what happens in this game. I'm making an absolutely massive Venom with my Hulkbuster here. We're going up to 240, and then my opponent is going to Shang-Chi me. But this game's a little bit weird. My opponent is also playing the same deck, and we have Mindscape as one of the locations. And the important thing here is that my opponent has to play the Shang-Chi on turn 5, and that means that we get to play into Bar Sinister on this final turn, and my opponent can't. And, I draw my own Living Tribunal. I couldn't remember if I drew my opponent's or my own, but I wind up drawing Living Tribunal on the final turn, so now I get to put 36 power into Bar Sinister, and that will mean that we have 40 power split across the 3 locations, and that's actually going to be enough to win here. My opponent can play like Odin into Mindscape to try to win that location, or they can play it into the mini lab to battle for all 3, but that's of course not the strategy you want to go with against the Living Tribunal. And so what is that? We've got 40, so 39, 13 power in all 3 locations ultimately, and that will be enough to grab the win. I want to take a look at some other cards really good with Bar Sinister and talk about some replacements and updates for the deck. And to kick things off, we got to talk about Green Goblin. It's just such a good card with the featured location. A ton of people are going to be playing it today because just for 3 energy, you can fill the location for your opponent, win that location guaranteed, and probably win the game in the process, especially if your opponent's entire deck is built around Bar Sinister. And that is the other reason I brought up. There was a second reason I'm playing 2 move cards, Nightcrawler and Jeff. If you can play either of those cards before your opponent flips over a Green Goblin, then you don't have to worry about getting goblined, and you can still do other things in Bar Sinister later on. I'm also recommending Destroy decks in this video, so those are kind of natural enemies to Green Goblin, which I think is just an additional incentive to go this route. I do want to talk about some other cards and updates that we could potentially make to this list as well. I guess I'll flash this list here up on the screen to say Nico probably deserves a slot in this deck. It's probably an upgrade over like Nova and Titania from the previous list. It's just such a strong card. It does so many things. It's basically like another copy of Forge, which is kind of like another copy of Nova. It's just a lot more versatile. So definitely think that Nico can do a lot of work here. And we'll talk about some of the other cards that I have in this list as we get through them. Next up, I have Grandmaster. I don't think that Grandmaster ultimately makes the cut. It's a little bit awkward depending on where Bar Sinister is, but you're not actually trying to use Grandmaster on Bar Sinister. You're just trying to use it on your Arnim Zola to make 2 more copies of Venom, get a little bit more power. It's cute. It probably doesn't ultimately really move the needle, and it's not something that is like incredibly consistent. If you are looking for consistency though, I do think that there are 2 cards that you might want to consider, and that is going to be Psylocke, which can give you extra energy, or Crystal. Now, Nico kind of draws you cards, and you can see that I've added Magic to this Destroy list on the screen here because Magic also kind of draws you a card and gives you extra energy. It kind of is just like Crystal plus Psylocke, but you could play Psylocke as well. I'm deciding to try out X-23, but you do have to recognize that X-23 does come with a definite drawback in that it could mess up your Arnim Zolas in the late game. So that is a little bit scary and something that you definitely want to keep in mind, but it could also be really fun. So we'll see what happens with that one if I wind up keeping X-23 in the list. I could see Psylocke just being better. You can make multiple Psylocks and then like destroy them, but you still have enough energy to maybe like power out an early Arnim Zola or something like that and do something cool. You really don't need to get like a super early Arnim Zola. And ultimately, I feel like magic is possibly just going to be enough, but I am going to try, like I said, this build that I currently have on screen here. One thing that you could do if you wanted to go even more over the top though, if you're just playing to have fun, which I kind of am. I'll be honest, I'm a little bit conflicted because there's only 2 more days left in the season, and while I don't really care about my rating overall, the infinite leaderboard will like lock in the positions that it's showing at the end of the month, and I think I'll be on there forever as long as I end the month in the top 1,000. So I do kind of have an incentive to not like go super crazy and tank my rating totally, but I might also want to have fun. We'll see what happens. But one card, if you want to go so much more over the top, is going to be Beast. To play that in Bar Sinister will not only return the Venom to your hand at a cheaper rate, but then another Beast will come down and that'll return to your hand, and you'll probably wind up skipping a draw because you'll either fill your hand with beasts, or some of your beasts might even stay on the field and not return to your hand, but then the next turn you could just like play Venom plus Beast again. And this also seems like kind of a cool way to avoid getting Shang-Chi'd, or you could use it to like move your Venom around in ways that your opponent might not be expecting. So kind of seems a little bit cool to me, but might also be a little bit over the top. I also wanted to bring up Absorbing Man to say that this card does not work specifically. So Absorbing Man copies the card if it's in play. However, when you're like doing stuff in Bar Sinister, the original Venom that you played winds up getting destroyed by the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th Venoms. So the original card that you played is no longer in play, and Absorbing Man will not be able to trigger it. And that's also going to go for Arnim Zola if you played into Bar Sinister. Hulkbuster, of course, also not going to work if you play it into Bar Sinister and then do other stuff to it. So yeah, probably avoid the Absorbing Man. One way that you could potentially get around some tech cards from your opponent is Professor X. I think that this is an interesting thing to consider if you are thinking of like armor or Cosmo or some other weird way to get around your opponent's Shang-Chi's and Shadow Kings. I think Professor X is a pretty interesting option, and it's particularly strong with Living Tribunal. Basically, you've got 4 turns to make the biggest Venom that you can, and then on turn 5, you are Professor Xing that location, and on turn 6, you're just dropping Living Tribunal elsewhere to spread that big Venom around. So this might be something that you want to consider if you are trying to make the deck a little bit more resilient and trying to play around some potential tech that your opponent's playing. One other thing to consider with this is if you are playing a Mr. Negative build of the deck. Some of these cards work pretty well with Mr. Negative, Arnim Zola and Null in particular, but then also, like I mentioned, Psylocke earlier on. You could potentially weave in a Professor X on a Mr. Negative turn. So just another card to keep in mind. And then the last card I got here is not a super new one, but it was one that I wasn't playing in the initial build of the deck. Potentially a little bit trickier to make the energy for it work, but I think what it gives you is something really powerful, especially in a 7-turn game where you saw that end board state has 2 large Venoms in it, and then another location with 0 power. Just drop Null in that 3rd location, and then your opponent has to deal with 3 tech cards against you, which is definitely possible. And if your opponents are playing that busted Serra deck right now, then they will have multiple tech cards. So, you know, be aware of that. But at the very least, I think that Null is worth considering. It is also a little bit awkward that because so many other people are just playing Null is bigger than Venom. I didn't show it off in the last clip, but if you imagine like, okay, Venom was that big, that means it ate a venom that was at least like half that size multiple times. So Null is just going to wind up being bigger than Venom, especially if they play it into Bar Sinister because they get multiple copies of it. But it's like a weird kind of like mirror breaker thing, and also just really strong. So if you have enough time in the mirror to play Null into Bar Sinister and then Living Tribunal elsewhere, or some other crazy scenarios where you get to Arnim Zola your Null, then of course you get to go pretty crazy. And one last thing that I wanted to take a look at to finish this video off with is just a boring basic destroy list. Now this is pretty close to, yeah, just boring basic destroy. The only thing here is I've cut Death for Arnim Zola, which is just a bigger high roll card when we're going to be seeing this bigger high roll location more frequently. And then I cut Wolverine for Magic. I think that might be a good piece to the deck. Just another way to potentially curve Null into Arnim Zola, which is your biggest high roll, barring Bar Sinister game. So I think this is at least a list to consider, and still playing the Hulkbuster because Hulkbuster is such an incredible high roll in Bar Sinister, so I don't want to cut that. Dracula isn't as good with Arnim Zola, so I'm not comboing on both of those. Cut down the Dracula. Like I said, the Grandmaster isn't super impressive either, and this list is probably the list that I will actually be playing today, just because this list is good in those 50% of games where Bar Sinister doesn't come up. So took a while to get to my actual recommendation, but all of these lists I think are fun. Even the first one, throw Beast in there. Let me know what you come up with, and let me know on Twitter your biggest whatever, your biggest win that you get with Bar Sinister today. I am going to want to see it because this is just such a sweet featured location, and let me know if you come up with any other sweet ideas in the comments down below. That is going to be it for me today. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'm NoLucksGiven. Peace.